Ray Ives, the pen of an underdog. Thanks for joining again, going down this journey, sharing this journey with you and the book, The Pen of an Underdog, because I believe there's golden nuggets in this book. And I think at the end of it, there's going to be a time where you'll realize to stop consuming and start creating. And so the next part here, I want to go through part one. I may break it up into different episodes, whatnot. But this is circa 1995 to 2007, really tales of an underdog. So again, I came to the crossroads where I felt at a certain time in my career when I had some extra time is to become an author. And so this is the beginning of my journey, right? This is the beginning of my journey. And anyone can do anything, even me and especially you. And what I mean by that, it's like, okay, if I woke up one day and I was in, my high school GPA was a 1.79 and, becoming an author seems very academic, right? Very intelligent. And I did it. I just did it. I became an author. And those are the meanings that I want to share with you. That's what I want to share with you. And so part of this starts out is 1995, 1996 is I had friends. And again, I come from the south side of Chicago, very loyal culture, but I had friends that were starting to do things. They were plans to go off to a 4-year school, University of Illinois, DePaul University, down to Florida, down to other, Wisconsin, other parts, California. They were going there, and it seemed very exciting to me. But for me, with a cumulative GPA of a 1.79, I really wasn't going anywhere. And I started to feel like my long-term future was not going to be very bright. Right? That was my feeling. And so I start this out and I say, anyone can do anything, even me and especially you. And what I mean by that is if I could put this book together, then I genuinely believe that you can do anything. I believe that. So I'm going to share some stories. The beginning starts off with stories. So it's really, let me try to be an author. Let me retell these stories from my memory and see what hits. Right? So 1995, I didn't have many options. After seeing everybody go around and my GPA of 1.79, and I didn't do very well on the ACT test, right? So the ACT or the SAT, I scored very below average. And I look back now and I thought to myself, it's like majority of people going in and taking those tests prepped for them. The kids, the juniors and seniors that were taking these tests, prepped for the test. They took the study guide. They took courses. For me, I just showed up. Again, that's where my mind was. It's like I wasn't looking at big picture. I was just showing up places. So I showed up. I didn't do very well. And I started thinking about where am I going to be with higher education? Maybe it's not for me. I remember my guidance counselor. And I would look at my guidance counselor and I just knew it. I intuitively knew, how is this guy going to give me advice? He's sitting here in this high school giving me advice about life. And it's like, I get it. Maybe there's he understood the methodology if there's a process, but I just knew he was telling me, his advice was, hey, maybe you should work with your hands, or maybe you should, did you ever think about joining the military? He's like, because you're not getting into college. You're not smart enough to go to college. So maybe you could, join the military. And I didn't think anything of that. My father was a Marine. My sister was in the Army. So was my brother-in-law. And I was like, okay, well, that kind of sounds like, setting the bar pretty low. Unless I knew I wasn't going to be a military career person, but I knew there's also a benefit getting into the military and then taking that next level. And so here I was. I decided, okay, everything he was telling me, the one thing that made sense was okay, join the Navy. Now you join the Navy. I don't have anything else going on. And so I was that was my one option at the time. And I was young. I think I was 17. I remember being 17 because my parents had to sign for consent. I knew that I was going to do things differently. Studying for the ASVAB, I went to a bookstore and bought the practice exams. And I don't know what it is. I had a 1.79 GPA, but I felt like this book that I was studying for was pretty simple. The ASVAB, ASVAB, the ASVAB was a pretty simple pretty simple test. And I was like, either I'm a genius or this is a simple test. And it was a simple test. So it came time to go do my physical. I did it overnight. I did my physical. Everything was fine. And so basically joining the Navy. I'm joining. And it came to the point where I'm sitting in front of I call him a commander. I don't know. He just had a lot of credentials, right? He had that like clean white shirt, a lot of pins, really intimidating guy, really forward, black and white, dry. And he had this like intimidating glare. And here I was, 17 years old, coming out of, okay, I'm joining the Navy. I just went through the medical exam. I took all these tests and sitting down in front of the guy. And so after I took the ASVAB, I did well on that. So I took another test, the nuclear test. It sounds like space age. Like, who's this guy with a 1.79 taking a nuclear test? Oh, long story short, apparently I did okay on that. Now it came to the point where I was going to join the Navy. So I'm sitting down in front of the commander and he's going through all these programs. And I remember looking at the program and I was like, my Southside judgment sort of turned on. It was this black and white marketing thing. And it highlighted all the jobs and scenarios. And he's like, okay, pick a job. And like, here I am on the spot. Like, I didn't get to summarize or get a peek at this. This is the first time I'm seeing it. So I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, it's like, wow, like what's going on here? And I point to one and I was like, okay, this looks good. This is like computer programming. And like at that time, like computer programming was like the future, right? It was the future. And he's like, oh, it's a great program. He's like, that's a 9-year program that's going to put you on a nuclear submarine. You're going to be below the ocean. You're going to be a nuclear submarine. You're going to be controlling this. And I really started to think, it's like, okay, like, do I want to be, like, I'm adventurous. Like I would go in a submarine, wherever you want to go. You want to go to West Africa? You want to go to the Middle East? Like on the coastline near there? Let's go. Put me on a submarine. And then it begins. It was like, okay, 9 years. I was like, so basically I'm going to join for 9 years, be in this program. Here I am at 17. And it's like something was telling me, this is an important part. Like something was telling me at that time, and I could only relate it to intuition because something at that moment told me this is a bad idea, right? This is a bad idea. Like, what am I going to do for 9 years? Like come back, like my friends won't know me. Everybody's going to be grown, like differently kind of grown, probably married and have families. And I just escaped for 9 years, which that's great for some people, right? I squandered a lot of my past. I got into some trouble, but it wasn't bad enough where I had to disappear for 9 years. Okay. And so he basically said, like, look, like you have to pick something. He's like, pick something in tech. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a great idea. So I'm going through and he comes back and he's like, great program. He's like, you're going to learn so much. He's like, you'll be able to work with technology companies. And he's really selling it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. He said it was a 7-year program. 7-year program. Okay. I felt like that was the time to be honest and say, like, look, like 7 years, I don't have 7 years. I barely know what 7 years looks like. I'm 17. I'm like, if I had to look at 17 years, my reference point is being 10 years old to 17. And now, 17 to 24 and beyond, I'm like, I don't know. It's not adding up. So I shared that with them. Really, I've expressed my vulnerability and I said, Commander, whatever, here is my idea. I would like to be in the Navy for 2 years. And I really thought the Navy would be able to give me that, like, that big government sense of discipline, which I think I needed at the time. Like I needed the drill sergeant. I needed the standardized procedures at that moment in my life, right? Because I was just kind of floating by. And so I was like, okay, I want to be in for 2 years. I want to come out, use the Montgomery GI Bill, and then go to college, get free tuition, right? Here's what he said. Okay, you want to be in for 2 years, you're going to be a shipmate. And I said, okay, whatever. Well, what does a shipmate do? Well, a shipmate, you're going to clean toilets and you're going to go to the top of a carrier ship in the middle of the ocean and you're going to wash it. And I was like, okay, well, cleaning toilets for 2 years and being on top of a ship. Like I could see the silver lining on being like on top of a ship, but like just being the guy to like walk around and like clean it and whatever it sounded like, shining shoes and I don't know, it just wasn't appealing. And so again, my thoughts were racing and like I just didn't know where to go with this. And I could just tell like by his mannerisms, he was losing patience. And so I said to him, I said, Mr. Commander, I'm sorry. I need time to think about it. Going in for 9 years is way too long. Going for 7 years is too long. And if I go in for 2 years, then I don't want to be a shipmate, So I just have to reconsider this. Maybe there's a sweet spot. But getting handed marketing brochure at the time on the spot and saying, pick the next 9 years of your life without ever seeing, without ever understanding exactly what 9 years is going to look like, what the job, it was, they were very vague. I mean, they had some bullet points, but was I going to sit there and say, okay, well, why don't you do this? Give me 3 hours. I'm going to read this over and then go. No. So again, he was getting super impatient and he was like, look, you're here. You're already in. He's like, there's no thinking about it. You are in. He's like, we spent money. We brought you to the Great Lakes facility. We did the medical evaluation. You have the medical clearance. He's like, you're in, son. You're in. And I was like, okay, this feels like a little standoff. And again, I don't know why the voice within me was saying, I think it was, I relied on my Southside culture to, sort of speak my mind, show strength, not be a jerk. I wasn't being a jerk, but I was like, not for me. I need to think about it. So all of a sudden, he gets up out of his chair, again, commanding officer, lots of medals, intimidating, strong. He had like big shoulders, walks over. I'm going to try to do this, but he gets in my face and I'm saying like nose to nose. Like if this microphone was my nose, his nose is right here. Goes drill sergeant, screaming on top of his lung, veins popping out his neck. You little punk, who do you think you are? You have no choice. Sign the contract. Sign the contract. Sign the contract now. Okay. As a 17-year-old, that's a little intimidating. So he went back around. And so his information, I am already in the Navy. He's making me sign the contract. And he just went drill sergeant. He gave me a taste of the discipline. And you know what? The discipline was fine. So I knew that I had to stand up for myself in my life. And again, everything that I've experienced up to this point was telling me, if I do want to get and join the Navy, this is probably a good time, but I have to think about it. And I don't know why, like intuitively, that just made sense at the time. And I was like, you know what? And now it really kicked in. And you could tell I'm not a tough guy. But I knew I had to be tough at that moment. And so he went back around. He was sitting down at his desk. And I looked at the contract and I looked him dead in his eyes. And we were staring at each other. And I said, I have an idea. Why don't you make me? I go, I'm not signing it. I slid the contract over with the pen. I go, you want me to sign it? Come over here, get in my face again, make me sign it. I go ahead, make me sign it. And again, I'm trying to be tough. Actually, I wasn't trying to be tough. I was truly expressing how I felt. And I knew that he challenged me. He gave me a challenge, and I knew I wasn't in the Navy. I knew he had no control over me. I was a minor at the time. Sure, my parents signed consent, but he had no control over me. He couldn't touch me. He could yell at me. He could kick me out. And again, he said, make me. Why don't you come over here to my side of the desk, make me sign it. I go, make me sign it. I go, that whole little skit you did, do it again. Make me sign it. And we just stared at each other. That was it. I got up, I left, and I didn't join the Navy. So one of my greatest stories of, again, and this is the pen of an underdog, I feel like one of the stories that helped me start believing in myself more was a coincidence. I had a standoff with a commander, with a naval commander. I had a standoff with him, right? And it's not like if that fight would have continued, sure, whatever happens, happens. I knew in that moment of a time, I had a small window. I wasn't in the Navy, and I challenged him. And I just felt that gave me strength. That started to make me feel less of an underdog. And it's like I started building these small victories. Because small victories lead to big wins. Small victories lead to big wins. So I'm sitting in front, and in my eyes, I defeated the dragon. I slayed the dragon. And so those are the stories, and those are the building blocks that I like to share. And there's more to come. So subscribe. I think there's going to be a lot more fascinating stories, and let's stay connected. Ray Ives, the pen of an underdog.